I was 30 years old when a single sentence rearranged my entire understanding of family. It didn't come gently. It didn't come in private. It came under fairy lights, beside a champagne table, with music playing softly in the background like nothing important was happening at all. We all agreed. You're not in the wedding party. The bridesmaid said it with a polite smile, the kind people use when they think they're being reasonable. Her lipstick was flawless. Her dress matched the others perfectly. She was holding a clipboard like authority had been assigned to her for the day. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry," I said. She tilted her head, already halfway done with me. "You're not part of the bridal party. Seating for you is outside." Outside. She gestured toward the edge of the garden, where folding chairs sat under the open sky, far from the decorated tent. No tablecloths. No place cards. Just rows of white plastic chairs arranged like an afterthought. I followed her hand slowly, my chest tightening. The tent behind her was stunning. White drapes, crystal chandeliers, long banquet tables dressed in linen so crisp it looked expensive to breathe near them. Laughter drifted out. Glasses clinked. Someone tested the microphone for speeches, and I stood there holding my clutch like it was suddenly too heavy. "I'm her sister," I said quietly. She nodded. "Yes, we know." We. That word landed harder than anything else. Before I could say more, she added, "This was decided weeks ago. We didn't want awkwardness." Awkwardness. I almost laughed. Instead, I felt heat rise up my neck, sharp and humiliating. I scanned the area instinctively, looking for my mother, for my father, for my sister, the bride, anyone who might step in and say, "This is a mistake." No one did. People moved around me, busy and purposeful. Servers passed with trays of drinks. Guests greeted each other. A photographer adjusted his lens. No one looked my way. The bridesmaid checked something off her clipboard. "You can wait over there until dinner is served. Someone will bring plates out." Plates! Out! She turned and walked away before I could respond. I stood frozen for a moment, then slowly made my way toward the chairs. My heels sank slightly into the grass. I reached the last row and sat down, smoothing my dress automatically, like pretending everything was normal might make it so. I replayed her words again and again. We all agreed. Who was all? My phone buzzed in my hand. A message notification lit the screen. From my sister. "Busy right now. Hope you're settling in, Red Heart." Settling in. I stared at the heart emoji until it blurred. A waiter appeared 10 minutes later and handed me a paper plate with chicken, potatoes, and a roll wrapped in foil. No utensils at first. He had to jog back to grab a plastic fork. "Sorry," he said. Instructions. Instructions. I ate slowly, aware of how ridiculous I must look, dressed for a wedding, seated alone, balancing food on my lap while the real celebration happened 10 meters away. That's when the memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, my sister had called me late at night. "I hate to ask," she'd said, voice soft, already emotional, "but the venue needs another deposit. Just temporarily." I'd sent the money without hesitation. Then there was the florist upgrade, the dress alterations, the emergency transportation change when a groomsman dropped out. Each time, it was framed the same way. "You're so reliable. You understand. Your family." I believed it. A laugh erupted from inside the tent. Loud, joyful. Applause followed. Someone was giving a toast. I wasn't there to hear it. I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the ground. My heart was racing now, not from sadness, but from something sharper. Awareness. I walked toward the tent entrance. A different bridesmaid stepped into my path, immediately, arm outstretched. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly. "Family seating only." "I am family," I replied. She hesitated, uncomfortable now. "This isn't my call." I looked past her, straight at my sister, who was laughing with her new in-laws near the head table. Our eyes met for a split second. She looked away. That was it. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. Not broken. Not angry. Clear. I stepped back, nodded once, and returned to my seat outside. I finished my food. I wiped my hands carefully with a napkin. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I had placed in the gift box earlier that day. The check was still inside. I stood, walked calmly to the gift table near the tent entrance, and retrieved it. No one stopped me. I heard gasps behind me as I opened the envelope. I didn't rush. I didn't shake. I tore the check cleanly in half. Then again. The sound cut through the music like paper ripping through silence. I dropped the pieces into the trash beside the table. A few people stared. Someone whispered my name. I turned once more toward the tent, toward the family who had agreed I didn't belong. And in that moment, standing outside the celebration I had helped build, I understood the truth I'd been trained not to see. This wasn't exclusion. This was positioning. And I was done standing where they put me. I didn't leave right away. That surprises people when I tell them this part later. They expect me to storm off, to cry in the parking lot, to do something dramatic that proves how hurt I was. But hurt wasn't what I felt anymore. I stayed because I needed to understand how long this had been happening without me noticing. I sat back down on that folding chair, crossed my ankles carefully so my dress wouldn't drag in the grass, and watched the wedding like it was a play I had unknowingly helped produce. Inside the tent, my sister moved easily from table to table, glowing. She looked happy, relaxed, not like someone under stress, not like someone who had been forced into hard decisions. That alone told me something important. This exclusion wasn't last minute. It was planned. I pulled my phone out again and opened my messages, scrolling backward through months of conversations. At first, everything looked harmless, familiar. Can you help me cover this just until Friday? You're honestly a lifesaver. I don't know what we'd do without you. I used to read those messages with pride. I was the dependable one, the calm one, the sister who didn't need much, didn't ask for attention, didn't complicate things. Now I read them differently. I noticed patterns I hadn't before. How every request came wrapped in urgency. How gratitude always followed payment, never before. How I was looped into logistics, budgets, fixes, but not celebrations. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, dry and humorless. I remembered the bridal shower. I helped plan it, paid for part of the venue, coordinated games, bought a gift off the registry that took me months to justify. But in the group photos later posted online, I was barely visible. Cropped out of some, tagged in none. I told myself it didn't matter. I remembered the dress fitting. All the bridesmaids had gone together. I hadn't been invited, but my sister had texted me photos afterward, asking my opinion. You have such good taste. I told myself that was enough. I remembered asking, casually weeks ago, so what color are you thinking for family attire? There'd been a pause on the line. Oh, she'd said lightly, just wear something neutral. Nothing that stands out. Nothing that stands out. The tent erupted into applause again. Another speech. I wondered who was speaking. Probably someone who had done less and been given more. A shadow fell across me. My mother stood there, arms folded, lips pressed together in a thin line that meant she was already upset, but not at the right person. What are you doing out here? She asked. I looked up at her. Eating. Her eyes flicked to the plate in my lap, then back to the tent, as if embarrassed on my behalf. This isn't the time, she said quietly. You need to be flexible. Flexible. I almost smiled. I was told this is where I'm seated, I replied. She sighed, rubbing her temple. You know how weddings are. Everyone's stressed. Don't take it personally. I held her gaze. Did you know? She hesitated. That pause told me everything. You didn't need to make it a thing, she said finally. I nodded slowly. I didn't. She glanced around, lowering her voice. Just let it go for today. We'll talk later. Later. Later was always where my feelings were sent to wait. She turned and walked back inside without another word. I watched her go, feeling strangely calm. Something shifted then, not all at once, but enough that I could feel the weight redistribute. I wasn't confused anymore. I was being managed. I opened my banking app. The wedding expenses were still there, neatly listed. Amounts I hadn't thought twice about sending because they'd come from people who knew exactly how to ask. Each payment had felt small in isolation. Together, they told a different story. I remembered how my sister never asked if I was comfortable, just if I was available. I remembered how my parents never offered to reimburse me, just thanked me for helping out. I remembered how being low maintenance had always been framed as a virtue, until I realized it was a role a role that kept me useful and quiet. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the grass. Inside, dinner was wrapping up. Servers began clearing plates. I stood up again, brushing grass from my dress. This time, no one stopped me as I walked away from the chairs. I passed the tent slowly, deliberately, not to go inside, but to look. To really look. I saw my sister laughing, glass raised. I saw my parents smiling beside her. I saw people clapping, celebrating, unaware or uninterested in who wasn't included. I didn't feel hatred. I felt distance. And distance, I was learning, is powerful. As I reached the parking area, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my sister. Can we talk tomorrow? Things are just crazy today. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Tomorrow had always been the day my feelings were meant to be addressed. Deferred. Softened. Forgotten. I typed one word back. Sure. Then I turned my phone off. As I got into my car, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup was intact. My eyes steady. I didn't look like someone who'd just been excluded. I looked like someone who had just stopped lying to herself. I drove away from the venue slowly, windows down, the sound of distant music fading behind me. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with the clarity I just gained. But I knew one thing for certain. The moment they decided I didn't belong in the wedding party, they also decided I was done paying for the illusion. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying. Not because I was replaying the wedding over and over. I didn't sleep because my mind was finally quiet enough to see clearly. When you spend your whole life smoothing things over, explaining other people's behavior, convincing yourself you're not that hurt, clarity feels unfamiliar. Almost dangerous. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at my kitchen table as the sun began to rise. My phone was still off. I wanted to understand the truth before anyone tried to rewrite it for me. I opened my laptop. The first thing I searched was my payment history. I wasn't looking for proof. I already had that. I was looking for patterns. 5 months. That's how long it had been going on. 5 months of quick favors. 5 months of temporary help. 5 months of me being positioned as a resource instead of a person. Each transfer had a label. Thoughtful. Innocent. Venue hold. Dress emergency. Transport issue. Vendor adjustment. Words that made it sound like circumstances, not choices. I opened my email next. Threads popped up immediately. Conversations I'd been copied on because I was good with details. Vendor confirmations sent to me directly. Contracts forwarded without explanation. Invoices addressed to my name. I scrolled slowly, my chest tightening with each click. It wasn't accidental. They hadn't been asking for help. They'd been assigning responsibility. Then I remember the shared folder. The one my sister had invited me to months ago when she said, "You're basically my second brain." At the time, I'd felt trusted. Included. I logged in. The folder was still there. Wedding_planning_final. Wedding_planning_final_V2. Wedding_planning_actually_final. I opened them one by one. Seating charts. Vendor timelines. Decor mock-ups. And then a tab I hadn't noticed before. Internal. Do not share. My fingers hovered for a second before clicking. Inside were spreadsheets. Notes. Planning documents, written in a tone that didn't sound like family at all. It sounded like branding. Guest optics. Energy alignment. Disruption risk. I scrolled until I saw my name. Not as a sister. As an entry. Name me. Role. Financial support confirmed. Visibility low. Placement. Exterior seating preferred. Notes. Not part of wedding party. Maintain boundaries. Exterior. The word landed hard. Like I was whether they needed to plan around. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, waiting for anger to hit. It didn't. What hit was something colder. Understanding. This wasn't neglect. It was design. I scrolled further and found a message thread embedded in the document. A planning chat between my sister and 2 bridesmaids. She's sensitive. She'll understand if we keep it casual. At least she's helping financially. We just need her to not make it about her. I closed the laptop slowly. I thought about the bridesmaid's voice at the wedding. We all agreed. Of course they had. They'd agreed long before they ever told me. My phone buzzed then, vibrating on the counter like it was nervous. I turned it back on. Messages flooded in instantly. My mother, my sister, an aunt I barely spoke to. All variations of the same thing. Why did you leave so early? You embarrassed us. You could have handled this better. Not one message asked if I was okay. I scrolled until I found the voicemail from my father. I hesitated before pressing play. His voice was calm, controlled. This family moves forward, he said. If you're not part of the solution, you don't get to stand in the pictures. I listened twice. Not because I needed to hear it again. Because I needed to hear it accurately. That sentence had shaped more of my life than I'd realized. I opened a notebook and wrote one line. I am not the problem they manage. I am the resource they protect themselves from. That was the click. Not rage. Not revenge. Precision. I spent the rest of the morning gathering facts. Screenshots. Receipts. Emails. Messages. Not to expose anyone. To protect myself. By noon, my kitchen table was covered in paper. Numbers. Dates. Notes. The story they'd tell would be emotional. The story I now had was factual. My phone rang again. My sister's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to explain myself. I didn't soften anything. I didn't fix the discomfort. Instead, I closed my notebook, stacked the papers neatly, and stood up. I looked around my apartment, the quiet, the order, the life I paid for without anyone's help. And I realized something important. They hadn't excluded me from the wedding party because I didn't belong. They'd excluded me because if I stood beside them, I might finally see the truth. And now that I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Not quietly, not politely, not from the outside. Clarity doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles in your chest and starts rearranging things without asking permission. By afternoon, I had stopped asking myself how could they do this? That question belonged to a version of me who still believed intention mattered more than impact. Now I was focused on something else. What am I going to do with what I know? I didn't want a confrontation fueled by emotion. I'd spent too many years being dismissed as too sensitive for that to work. So I chose something steadier. Structure. The first call I made wasn't to my sister. It was to a lawyer. His name was Daniel. He sounded unhurried, which I appreciated. I explained the situation without drama. Dates, amounts, context. There was a pause when I finished. That's organized, he said carefully. I've had practice, I replied. He asked me to send everything. I did. While the files uploaded, I walked around my apartment, noticing how calm my hands were. No shaking. No pacing. Daniel called back 40 minutes later. You're not obligated to continue any financial involvement, he said. And you can revoke authorization immediately. Even this close to the wedding. I asked. Yes, he replied. Especially this close. That word settled something inside me. Good. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the darkened screen of my laptop. I wasn't angry enough to destroy something. I was clear enough to withdraw. Next, I called the wedding planner. Her tone shifted the moment I gave my name. Yes, she said slowly. I recognize it. I'm listed as the financial contact for several vendors, I said calmly. I'm retracting authorization. Effective immediately. There was silence on the line. Then, that will cause complications. I understand, I said. I'll be emailing documentation. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain my feelings. I sent facts. By evening, I could feel the ripple begin. Emails came in from vendors asking for confirmation. Pauses in setup. Requests for clarification. Nothing dramatic yet. Just friction. I turned my phone off again and went for a walk. The city felt different when I wasn't carrying the weight of keeping everyone comfortable. Lighter. Sharper. That night, I packed 3 white boxes. No gifts inside. Just paper. Statements. Notices. Copies. One for my sister. One for my parents. One for the gift table. I chose white not for purity, but because it matched the aesthetic they cared so much about. If I was going to be excluded from the wedding party, I would still respect the theme. The morning of the wedding, I dressed simply. Black dress. Clean lines. No jewelry that caught the light. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to be clear. When I arrived at the venue, people were everywhere. Florists, photographers, assistants moving quickly like nothing was wrong. I walked past the welcome sign without stopping. The planner saw me and froze. "You're early," she said. "I know," I replied. She swallowed. "We're having some delays." I nodded. I expected that. We walked together toward the tent. The air buzzed with tension now, subtle, but unmistakable. The sound system wasn't being tested. The cake hadn't been moved into place. Whispers followed us. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. The illusion was already cracking. I stopped just outside the tent. For the first time since the day before, I stepped under the fabric roof. Inside, heads turned. My mother's face drained of color. My sister stared at me, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. I placed the 3 white boxes on the head table, one by one. Then I turned to face the room. "I wasn't invited to stand with you," I said evenly. "So I brought something else." My father stood up abruptly. "This isn't the time." I met his eyes. "It is." Daniel stepped forward, calm, professional. "As of this morning," he said clearly, "all financial authorizations involving my client have been revoked. Any continued use of her name, funds, or credit constitutes a violation." Murmurs rippled through the tent. My sister whispered my name, sharp and urgent. I didn't look at her. I'd spent enough years responding to tone instead of truth. "This is embarrassing," my mother said, voice tight. I smiled slightly. Being excluded was embarrassing. "This is just honest." Silence stretched. Then someone asked, softly, "Where's the cake?" I picked up my bag. "That," I said, "was part of the arrangement." I turned and walked toward the exit. No shouting, no tears, just the sound of a celebration unraveling behind me. As I stepped back into the sunlight, I felt something shift completely. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking toward myself. The chaos didn't happen with shouting. It happened in the quiet, precise way that truth always works best. The DJ unplugged his equipment without explanation. The lighting crew froze, checking their orders again. The cake was rolled back toward the delivery truck, untouched, perfect in its stillness. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to demand attention. The absence of authorization was enough. And that was when my sister found me. Adam. Not my sister, but my brother-in-law now. His tuxedo looked tight. His hair was plastered down, sweat forming at his temple. He marched toward me, phone in hand, anger coiled like a spring. "What did you do?" he hissed, voice low but tense. "I followed instructions," I said calmly. His hand trembled as he gestured toward the boxes on the table. "You can't just sabotage my wedding." "This isn't sabotage," I replied. "This is clarity." "Clarity," he spat. "You weren't invited because you make things tense." I smiled, a small, deliberate smile. I wasn't invited because I wasn't meant to speak. Not until now. Guests were beginning to notice. Conversations faltered mid-laughter. Whispered questions spread. The tension was almost tactile. My mother approached, voice tight, trying to reel in the narrative. "Christy, please, this is..." "Embarrassing myself?" I asked, cutting her off. "Or revealing what's already been done behind closed doors?" Her lips parted, no words ready. I gestured toward Daniel, who was standing just behind me, briefcase open, documents ready. "As of today," he said, clear and authoritative, "all joint financial accounts, access, and authorizations involving Christy Perkins and your family have been terminated. Unauthorized use of her identity is a legal issue. Documentation is attached." Gasps went through the tent. My father lunged forward. "You little..." I held up a hand. "Oh, you mean this?" I pulled my phone from my bag. A single tap, and the grainy security footage played, time-stamped, unmistakable. My father standing at a counter, my ID in his hand, my signature on a credit application he wasn't authorized to use. Shock washed over everyone. Lily, my sister, dropped her bouquet. My mother's voice was a whisper. "You don't know what you're doing." I looked at her. "You never let me know who I was being." I turned to Adam. "You didn't invite me because I was supposed to be invisible. You took my labor, my money, my silence, but not my awareness." I pressed play on a voicemail. His words echoed. "This family moves forward. If you're not part of the solution, you don't get to stand in the photos." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand apologies. I walked out. The tent erupted behind me. Phones ringing, vendors scrambling, guests whispering. Chaos replacing orchestrated elegance. But I didn't look back. By the time I returned home, the first of the legal confirmations arrived. Fraud confirmed. Accounts frozen. Liability cleared. My father wasn't so lucky. His license suspended. Financial exposure scrutinized. Then came a message that startled me. Not from him, but from an uncle I hadn't spoken to in years. A flash drive. Inside, recordings from years ago. My father and mother talking about me, calling me good for the money and never too important. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I shut the laptop and went for a walk. 2 weeks later, Lily left Adam. The venue pursued him legally. Vendors pressed charges. And slowly, the pieces fell into place as reality overtook the illusion. I posted a short video online, calm, clear, showing receipts, messages, and legal confirmations. No dramatics. No shouting. Just facts. I was erased. I erased the lie. The video went viral. People started sharing their own stories. Stories about being used, invisible, taken for granted, all because they were the quiet support that families and friends assumed would always be there. I built a platform. No more tents. My first post read simply, "You're not ungrateful for saying no. You're not selfish for walking away. You're not wrong for choosing peace." Lawyers volunteered. Therapists offered free sessions. Journalists, podcasts, and ordinary people reached out to me. I said no to most invitations. I wasn't interested in being a symbol. I was interested in freedom. 6 months later, I disappeared. Not in drama. Not in protest. Just disappeared. New town. New number. No social media. Quiet mornings. Work that mattered, but didn't define me. A life where I didn't have to shrink for anyone. My aunt emailed. My mother called. My sister tried different numbers. Each time, I let them go unanswered. "You can't just disappear," one message said. "We're still family." I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but indifference. The weight of obligation I had carried for decades had been lifted, and I wanted to feel it gone completely. I forgot birthdays, addresses, anniversaries. I even forgot the little ways I used to manage their lives without being asked. The mental load that had always defined me suddenly had no home. One rainy afternoon, I sat alone in a quiet cafe. Steam rose from my coffee cup, the rain tapping softly against the window. I scrolled through my phone once and noticed 54 missed calls. Old numbers, new ones, names I hadn't spoken in months. I didn't open a single message. The old reflex to explain myself, to justify, to soften my presence was gone. They had used to own my reactions. Now, they couldn't even influence my silence. I stared out the window and noticed a perfect white wedding cake in the bakery display. Smooth icing. Symmetrical. Sterile, in a way that almost hurt to look at. I realized something then. That cake, like the wedding I had been excluded from, represented everything they wanted me to be. Beautiful, present, useful, unnoticed, not loved, just aligned with their plans. I didn't want to be that anymore. I leaned back and thought about the story I had built. Not the one they told, but the one I lived. The one I documented, calculated, protected, and finally shared. No More Tents had become bigger than I expected. It wasn't just a platform. It was a movement, a voice for anyone who had been used under the guise of family, friendship, or loyalty. People shared their stories for the first time. Some cried on the messages. Others laughed at the absurdity they had tolerated for years. Lawyers offered guidance. Therapists offered sessions. Journalists reached out. Podcasts invited me to speak. I said no to most of it. I didn't want attention. I wanted freedom. Weeks turned into months. Life slowed. My phone stayed quiet, and that quiet became my anchor. Then one evening, my phone rang. My father had collapsed. The voice on the other end trembled, urgent, panicked. "He's asking for you," my aunt said. My thumb hovered over the screen. A younger version of me, the one who had always needed permission to act, would have answered immediately, would have rushed to the hospital, to the bed, to the crisis. I didn't. I locked the phone. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, not even out of fear. Out of clarity. This was not my story anymore. It was theirs. They had chosen how to live in it. I had chosen mine. That night, I opened the last file my uncle had sent me. A scanned photo from years ago. 12-year-old me, standing stiffly in a borrowed blazer, holding a certificate I barely remembered earning. My father's hand rested on my shoulder, heavy and possessive. On the back, in faint blue ink, "She doesn't know we're just using her." I folded it carefully. Then I burned it. The smoke curled into the air like a promise, a past reduced to ashes. I sat back in my chair, listening to the rain. My coffee had gone cold. My phone remained face down. Freedom didn't announce itself. It didn't roar. It whispered. I realized that was all I had ever wanted. Not validation. Not apology. Not recognition. Just space to exist without being someone else's ledger. No one could own that. Not my family. Not my money. Not my silence. Not my time. I took a deep breath. For the first time in decades, I felt entirely aligned with myself. I closed my eyes, and I let the storm that had once ruled my life fade. Quiet. Calm. Freedom. The world didn't collapse because I stayed silent. The world didn't collapse because I walked away. It thrived because I finally stopped being a ghost in my own story.